For the one of you that hasn't met me yet, my name is Paul Barrett. I work for Jan Evans in the business school at Longwood. I welcome you to the second of 4 executive residence programs this academic year. With the college's mission of preparing students to be tomorrow's citizen leaders, we cannot think of a better way to help us accomplish this than to bring some of the best, most successful business leaders to campus. Tonight's guest speakers are successful business leaders, and they have infused their government and consulting commitments with values and competencies that have literally sustained the economic growth of the United States of America. We're about to learn their real-life experiences and how these experiences has helped to form their vision of values and an unyielding approach towards excellence in service. Yes, we're very fortunate to have them with us this evening. Our program began in the 1990s, and it continues to be an important program for learning for our students, faculty, staff, and community partners. With the theme of this year's series, Competitive Leadership Values, we will be learning more about how one of the greatest social experiments in the world, known as the United States of America, continues to establish organizations that provide valued leadership both nationally and around the world. Tonight's event is sponsored by Barrett Capital Management and Eagle Fire, and we thank these gracious sponsors for bringing the most distinguished and influential leaders to Longwood. When I think of our speakers this evening, I'm reminded of the remarks made by Hugh Goldthorpe, the author, in his book, I Look Up to Giraffes. The author said, and I quote, "Carbon paper doesn't last very long." Their point really is a lesson that we can all learn from, and that is when we try to emulate or copy others, we, like carbon paper, eventually wear thin and wear out. To underline this lesson, author Goldthorpe cited a real-life experience with Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, who preached a sermon entitled, Be Yourself. In his sermon, Dr. Peale stated that we are each unique individuals. No two of us are alike, and we must use our talents to the best of our abilities. Some of us may have more or less talent, and that is simply okay. Because what is key in all of this is that we know ourselves. Be true to ourselves, admit our limitations, but continually focus on our strengths. In this manner, we can and we do make a difference. Tonight's guest speakers are a terrific example of executives who have earned their way up, not just the corporate ladder, but the ladder of life, and who have been making a difference every step of the way. Let's start from the beginning. Our speakers were born and raised in India. In addition to India, they've lived in Indonesia, Greece, Singapore, Canada, and the United States, and they speak multiple languages. One of our speakers was a news and sports anchor on national television in India. He has led global business operations of several major U.S. corporations before he was appointed in 2010 as the United States Assistant Commerce Secretary for Trade Promotion and Director General of the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service. Our other speaker this evening designed, listen carefully, and managed the most effective presidential fundraising campaign in the United States in history. He has also worked in dedicated service to aid the poor, the orphaned, the sick and the dying, alongside Mother Teresa in Calcutta. We're talking about a wide and deep skill set with our speakers. Determination? You bet. Leadership skills? You bet. Our speakers tonight are global leaders who have changed lives and communities for the better, and they're about to share their values-based philosophy with us. I thank them both in advance for sharing their stories with us this evening. But before our speakers are introduced, I would like to recognize our financial sponsors for tonight's program. Would you please stand? From Barrett Capital Management, we have with us the CEO, David Barrett. Many of you know that David is my taller, smarter, more handsome brother. And those of you who have heard me speak before know that because he's been telling me that most days since I was 4 years old. We also have with us Corey Nichols, Corporate Inspections Manager with Eagle Fire. Corey, are you here, please? Stand. I would also like to recognize the Student Sponsoring Association for tonight's event. We're all the brothers of Delta Sigma Pi. Please stand. Thank you, future business leaders. Finally, it is my pleasure to present to you the individual who will actually introduce our guest speakers. Ms. Courtney Lovings is a senior at Longwood. Yeah, excuse me. New dean. Is a senior at Longwood from Mechanicsville, Virginia, who will be completing the Bachelor of Science and Business Administration degree in Marketing and Management this coming May. As president of the Delta Sigma Pi professional fraternity, she's been hard and smart in managing meetings and activities of a very, very active student association. I say hard because that is really a tough job. Courtney, you've done such a great job. She has also fit into her schedule, work with the Dean Student Advisory Board, being a corresponding secretary for Alpha Delta Pi sorority, and in her spare time, she tours around prospective students, families, and others around campus as a Longwood ambassador. She has been recognized on the Dean's List and will graduate with an expected 3.60 GPA or higher. Through each of these activities, Courtney has learned and applied her growing leadership and teamwork skill set, and it is marking her for a fast-track mobile career upon graduation in her chosen field. Please join me in welcoming to the podium one of our best students, Courtney Lovings.
Thank you, Dean Barrett. Tonight we are pleased to have Mr. Suresh Kumar and his son Addy here to speak with us on behalf of the College of Business and Economics Executive and Resident Series. Mr. Kumar joined the management consulting firm Oliver Wyman as a partner in the Health and Life Sciences and Public Sector Practice Groups in March 2013. Oliver Wyman is a leading global management consulting firm that combines deep industry knowledge with specialized expertise in strategy, operations, risk management, and organization transformation. Prior to this position, Mr. Kumar served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Director General of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Services in the Obama administration. During Kumar's tenure, exports grew over 16% annually and contributed to half of U.S. GDP growth. Before serving in the Obama administration, Mr. Kumar spent 30 years as a manager and consultant, including leading Johnson & Johnson's worldwide consumer pharmaceuticals business. Mr. Kumar, born and raised in India, obtained an economics degree from Delhi University and a master's in management from Bombay University. He currently serves as a distinguished visiting professor of international business at George Washington University. Joining Mr. Suresh Kumar tonight is his son, Addy Kumar. Addy currently serves as a consultant at McKinsey & Company. He is a veteran of the Obama White House, where he recently served as Deputy Assistant to the Vice President of the United States and Special Advisor to the Chief of Staff. He has significant consulting experience in consumer and healthcare sectors and functional expertise in financing and serving private equity clients. Addy has a double major in economics and government from Georgetown University with an MBA from Stanford University. On behalf of the International Fraternity of Delta Sigma Pi and the College of Business and Economics, I introduce Mr. Kumar and his son, Addy.
Thank you, Courtney, for that wonderful introduction. You know, sometimes I do like to meet the guy you're talking about. I don't know what you said. I wish I could take credit for the entire exports of the United States, but of course I can't do that. But some things did work well. Kidding aside, I'm delighted to be here at Longwood with you today. It has been a wonderful day. You know, you need a break out of your routine, and it is always fascinating to be with you people who energize us. And I also could get to see what Longwood is about. You can only glean that much from a website, but this is a special place. It was much bigger than what I thought it is. It was prettier than what I thought it was. And the discussions I've had have been very stimulating. So I thank you for having me here today. I'm also delighted to be sharing the podium with Addy. This is a first for us. We've never done this, so it's particularly special. for any parent to do so with their son. We do share several similarities, but we're also different. We both served in the private sector and the government. We both served in the Obama administration. We are both management consultants, except he works for the competition. And we are definitely global nomads. But Addie is closer and better known to the president, who knows me as my son's father. While I've studied entirely in India and teach at leading universities here, Addie has been educated across 3 countries and has truly experienced global education. But the bottom line is this: we have been incredibly fortunate to be able to follow our passion of leading a global life. We thought we would share with you some of our experiences, not just to reminisce about our past, it's fun doing that, but to paint a picture of the possibilities, maybe even help you dream about what the future can be. So before going much further, let me show you a video that I downloaded from YouTube. It is one I saw a few years ago, and I believe one that sets the context for our conversation today. It is humbling when you see that. And I have reflected on my own life as I've seen some of these changes, at least, not all of them. I was born and educated in India, the son of an infantry colonel and a musician mother. My father was never stationed longer than 2 years in any one place. I was determined to look for a more anchored and a less disruptive life, but graduated with global aspirations. I quickly realized that I could not have it all. My passion for global management was shared by my then girlfriend from business school, now my wife of over 30 years. So began our journey. Today, the US is the 6th country we call home, and we find ourselves the quintessential global nomads. So much for planning anchored lives and classic identities. I guess my wife and I sufficiently confused my Stanford-educated son and Harvard-educated daughter. It sometimes takes them 30 minutes to answer the simple question, where are you from? Having a goal helped us navigate. Our journey has been as exciting as it has been educating and rewarding. And the best part is that someone else paid for us to see the world. Every time I visited a new country or took on a new job, I spoke with consumers, competitors, collaborators. They taught me much. The continuous learning on the job is fascinating. There has never been a dull moment because somewhere, somehow, something is somewhat changing. My wife and I set out to pursue an international career. The term global did not exist then, or was certainly not in vogue when it existed. I pursued my passion for globalization across sectors: business, nonprofit, education, media, and government. I wish I could stand here and tell you that I had the foresight and had planned this all. But that would not be true, because I did not. Instead, I pursued things that I enjoyed: being a sports and news anchor on television, a global business manager, a professor of global management, and a consultant. If I were to satisfy my parents' wish, I would have been a doctor. If I followed my grades, I would have been a finance major. And if I stuck to the advice of teachers, bosses, and search consultants, I would not have strayed off the beaten path. Being the global nomad helped me gain enormously through engagement across sectors. These experiences provided invaluable perspectives and helped me develop skills that allow me to do what I do today: facilitate business, commerce, and trade. And I've been incredibly lucky to serve several companies and indeed the United States. In hindsight, it was the pursuit of my passion, even more than a plan, that helped. The path I chose may not have been the most conventional, but will likely become more common as institutions seek individuals with diverse, interconnected experiences. My journey began in India and brought me to America via Greece, Indonesia, Singapore, and Canada. Along the way, somehow, I acquired 3 passports. I moved from sales to marketing, then to running businesses of some of the world's best-known companies like Unilever, Levi Strauss, and Johnson & Johnson, and eventually managing businesses across continents and the world. While I was doing this, Addie and his sister found their passion serving with Mother Teresa in India, working in child labor camps, and with internally displaced people in places such as East Timor, Azerbaijan, and the Congo. I was smitten by what they did. Their experiences provided me the reversal learning and led me to set up Kaizen Innovation, a consulting practice to help in economic development and to save lives and improve livelihoods. My children taught me that we must all play our part to make a difference. I assisted the Clinton and Gates Foundations, worked with governments and incredible people in Rwanda, Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, and Tunisia, and applied all that I learned running businesses to the world of economic development with the singular goal of helping Africa feed itself. It was profoundly gratifying. We worked with farmers in the villages as much as we did with governments in capital cities to realize spectacular results. Rwanda even moved from being a net importer to become an exporter of food. But as you all know, much remains still to be done in Africa. Then I received the offer of a lifetime. I was honored, privileged, and humbled to be asked by President Obama to lead our nation's exports and trade promotion. It was a privilege to serve as Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Director General of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. I believe my diverse experiences across geographies and across sectors helped me first secure and then contribute to the job. As you know, the years 2010 through 2012 were challenging. But as I reflect today, they were also incredibly personally satisfying. The men and women of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, who I had the privilege of leading, rose to the occasion to double the exports we physically facilitated. And the return on investment in the service also doubled. Governments generally do not track such measures as return on investment. But what gets measured gets done. Every dollar invested in the USFCS that returned $101 in 2009 returned $215 in the year 2012. This was 10 times the UK equivalent of our service earned. Every pound invested in their service returned 22 pounds. Exports as a percentage of our GDP went up from 11% to 14% between 2009 and 12, and that is an addition of 3% of a $16 trillion economy. If you find US exports performance appealing, you will find the potential for growing US exports particularly exciting. I believe this presents opportunities for you to consider as you reflect and consider your own career. While 95% of the global population lives outside the United States, only 1% of America's 280,000 companies export. And of those who export, 58% export to only one market, just one country. We can and we simply must do better. Look at it. You saw the video talking about China and India. 36% of the world's population, the population on Earth, reside in these two countries. 36%. These countries add an Australia and a New Zealand to their population every single year. We just do not punch at our weight class in the emerging markets, which are hungry for American products. Whether you start something on your own or join a company, those of you who are future entrepreneurs will find a world of opportunity out there. Exports as a percentage of Germany's GDP is 45%. For Canada, it is over 30%. Most of Europe are in the mid-30s. 25% of China's GDP comes from exports. And even after performing spectacularly, 14% of our GDP is only from exports. To explore new markets, we must be willing, and you must be willing, to cross the ocean, to consider states outside of Virginia in the United States, to consider learning, working, engaging across the world in different countries. Simply put, to cross the ocean, you must be willing to lose sight of land. The opportunity and potential for growth in global markets is immense. Most parents would prefer their children to work for a big company where there is job security. You just saw in the video how many jobs you're going to have over your lifetime. The U.S. Department of Labor estimates that by age 38, the average worker will have 10 to 14 jobs. The 10 jobs most in demand you saw in the year 2010 did not exist in 2004. We parents know more about the professions of yesterday while you seek the professions of tomorrow. Most of us advice givers have more of our lives behind us while you have more of your life ahead of you. You must reach out to parents, teachers, and friends as sounding boards, but you will need to follow your own passion, and fish where the fish are. These are the years that you are investing in yourself. This is about you. This is not about speakers coming here and preaching to you. Indeed, Addie and I did not even want to have a talk. We wanted to have a conversation. And we are hoping that when the two of us both shut up, we will have that conversation. Fully use the various resources you have at Longwood. Aim to do the best you can, to learn, to enrich yourself, to seek guidance from faculty, to network with friends, and get ready for a lifetime of productive employment. Employers look for above-average performers with horse sense. Entrepreneurs indicate that hard work, persistence, and discipline are more important than IQ. Their grades do not indicate superior intelligence. The average millionaire had a GPA of 2.92. Business owners were the lowest of the group, with the average GPA being 2.76. It may also help to know that the ability to work well with people is much more important than how high in your class you graduate. I'm not for a moment suggesting that you aim for low GPAs. I'm asking you to be aware of global opportunities, to be inquisitive, and to connect with your passion to maximize your potential. Know yourself. Know what you want to do, how you work with people, and then go with gusto and communicate compellingly why you chose a particular profession. I looked up your website. The university's mission is to develop citizen leaders prepared to make positive contributions for the common good of society. Hopefully, I have given you some ideas of what the future beholds in whatever you choose to do in private or public sectors, or like me, with a foot in both camps. I'm not going to predict the future, nor do I need to. Globalization is here to stay, and the interconnectedness amongst people increase by every passing hour. The web has shrunk the world. It offers incredible resources to future entrepreneurs and businessmen. You saw how exponentially Google and Facebook, or for that matter, Twitter has grown. Those who seek a global career do so at a time of incredible change and incredible opportunity. Indeed, the only thing that will be constant in the global world is change itself. The future is simply not what it used to be. There is no beaten path, but there is the opportunity to create your own path in a world of opportunity. After all, we are the captains of our ship and the masters of our fate. Mine is only one part of the story you're going to hear. Addie has several more. After he is done with his presentation, we'd love to engage in a conversation. That's what we really came here for. Thank you very much.
You guys hear me? Cool. I wanted to talk to you about just my experience since graduating from college. In contrast to my dad, I actually was in college relatively recently and haven't been out for all that long. So I want to spend just the first few minutes actually just telling you my story, and then the last few minutes going back over there and just kind of reflecting on some of the key lessons I've learned along the way. I graduated from college in 2003 from Georgetown. As my dad said, we grew up all over in 5 different countries for me, 6 for him. And but ended up in high school in New Jersey, and then ended up in college in Washington, D.C., which was fitting because it was one of the most international cities around. And other than spending time getting sort of good enough grades, I basically immersed myself in all sorts of extracurriculars and what the city had to offer. So I interned at the American Red Cross, at Amnesty International, with Senator Ted Kennedy, and really sort of grew this love for politics. But when it came time to graduate, I realized that not only did I not really know that much about anything, but I didn't know anything about business. So I decided to accept an offer with a management consulting firm named McKinsey, where I headed after Georgetown, and I spent 2 years living in New York, but working in across the U.S. and also being lucky enough to live and work in Sweden and Germany for 2 years, advising CEOs and private equity firms and others that were facing sort of management problems, and really learned more through that experience, I think, than I did in 4 years of college. And then realized I really wanted to, and no joke, I told some of you this, really just wanted to move out to California. So whether it was going to be a job that took me there or school that took me there, that's what I wanted to do. And so applied to business school at Stanford and was lucky enough to get in, and headed out to California for 2 years. And just took in everything that the Bay Area had to offer, from the wineries to Tahoe, to being in business school and being in school once again, which I loved. And it was my second year of business school where the story sort of really starts, and where I started to make sort of very unconventional and different decisions that have really shaped the last 5 years of my life. I was deciding what I wanted to do after business school, and at that time I was thinking about going back to McKinsey or going back to Wall Street, which is where I spent my summer in between my first and second year of my MBA program. But in 2007, President Obama, then Senator Obama, decided that he was going to run for president. And I just thought that was really cool. So I had these grand visions of drinking a lot of beer with my friends in Eastern Europe over spring break, but instead decided to buy a plane ticket out to Chicago, knowing only that I had my cousin's floor to sleep on, and knowing nothing else other than I wanted to try to volunteer for the campaign. And so showed up in Chicago and showed up at 200 East Michigan Avenue, which is a high-rise right downtown, and basically talked my way into the security guards calling down the volunteer coordinator and letting me in. And for 2 weeks, I answered the phone and I got the mail every day. And that experience in itself was enough to cause me, when I went back to business school for my third quarter, for my last quarter to finish up, to cause me to potentially, at the chagrin of my parents, you can ask my dad later, say I didn't want to go back into finance and I didn't want to go back into consulting. I was going to pack up my Honda Civic and drive to Chicago to try to join the Obama campaign. It was still pretty early. It was July of 2007, still a year away from the election. So I showed back up, got back into the building a little bit easier this time, and started again answering the phones and getting the mail every day for about a month, and doing anything else that people asked me to do. And I was fortunate enough that the person who ran the mailroom really sort of took a liking to me and asked and basically sort of annoyed the COO and CFO of the campaign every day to give me something else to do. And finally, the CFO of the campaign called me in to do a project for her. And literally, it was the end of the second quarter of 2007. As you all probably know, one of the ways that candidates and the news really measures the viability of candidates early on in a presidential election is by how much money they raise. And we had just finished the second quarter, and President Obama, or Senator Obama at that time, had outraised Hillary Clinton in sort of dramatic fashion at the end of the quarter, and the National Finance Committee on the campaign was really, really excited. But internally on the campaign, we were pretty worried because we were spending cash at a lot faster clip than she was. So the CFO called me in and said, well, there are 3 big areas to spend on a campaign. There's media, there's personnel, and there's travel. And we're not spending that much on media right now, so we can put that aside. You're not allowed to fire anyone, so you're not going to look at the personnel budget. But I really want you to look at the travel budget and tell us what you think we can do differently. And I took that and I basically ran with it. And in about a month and a half, we were down a process where we were renegotiating our travel vendor contracts, and led to cutting our transaction costs on flights from $70 to $20, on hotel bookings from $40 to $10, and just saving the campaign a ton of money. And so it was that sort of small olive branch that I was extended at a time that basically got the CFO to actually hire me and start paying me money to work for her. And this was in about August or September of 2007. That eventually led to my helping her plan financially as we approached the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primaries. And the rest is sort of history. As you guys remember, back in 2008, Senator Obama won the Iowa caucuses, lost the New Hampshire primaries, won, tied in Nevada, won South Carolina, and then on February 5th, which is Super Tuesday in 2008, we won enough of the vote to feel pretty comfortable that we were going to be the nominee, that he was going to be the nominee. And at that point, they promoted me to be the deputy CFO of the campaign and asked me to build out a 25-person general election staff to manage the campaign's budget and financial strategy. So I did that for about 7 or 8 months. And fast forward to November 4th, we win on election day. And a couple days later, I get a call from a guy named Jim Messina, who was then named to be Rahm's deputy, the deputy White House chief of staff, and said, hey, Adi, you built the budget for the campaign. I have to build a budget for the White House. You can probably do that, right? So I said, sure, I can give it a shot. And so I once again packed up my Honda Civic and drove out to DC from Chicago, showed up on the transition office and spent the next 2.5 months basically building the White House budget and staffing plan for the president and for the vice president. And it was kind of a cool job because literally only 4 or 5 people in the entire government were able to see what I was doing because we hadn't gotten into the administration yet. And that's where I got to know Rahm and got to know others who brought me into the White House later on in December. Rahm and Jim asked if I wanted to come and work in the Chief of Staff's office in the White House. And so I said, can I have 24 hours to think about it? And they said yes. And I slept on it and I thought about it, and it was sort of a no-brainer. So I still remember the day where Inauguration Day on January 20th, where we were standing listening to the president give his inaugural address, and then immediately loaded onto a bus and drove down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House and entered in. I was probably the 20th or 25th person to walk through the gates of the White House, and we had not a clue what was going on. Effectively, the entire staff basically turns over, and there's no real sort of instruction manual as to what to do on day one. And so I spent a lot of the first 5 or 6 months working for Rahm, trying to figure out how the place worked. He was a congressman, but he hadn't served in the White House for about 8 or 10 years. He was in the Clinton White House before that. So really literally trying to figure out how the place worked and dealing with all sorts of crises that came up. We also then passed the Recovery Act, which was the 2009 stimulus package. It was an $800 billion package of economic aid that was spread across 29 agencies and over 250 government programs. And as that started to pick up steam, it was very clear that we needed an internal operation within the White House to actually make sure that the money was being managed effectively and that we were hitting the various deadlines that were in the act. And so Rom and the VP asked if I would do that. And for a very uncomfortable 8 months, I basically had two jobs, one working for Rom and the other working for the vice president, and basically sleeping in the office with sort of two suits in my office and a shower down the hall. And that's how I lived for 8 months, and it was unsustainable. So about 8 months later, I left and I worked in a more dedicated fashion for the vice president, and still managing the Recovery Act, but also traveling with him across the country and traveling with him to South Africa for various speeches, for various events, and then working very closely with mayors and governors and agency heads across the government to make sure that the Recovery Act money was spent wisely. And then fast forward to 2012, and I had been a part of the Obama-Biden team for about 5 years, and decided that I wanted to sleep a little bit more. And also the Recovery Act, out of the $800 billion or so of the act, about $650 billion had been obligated. The large majority of that had actually been outlaid and spent, and the large majority of what was left was remaining tax cuts and other sort of mandatory spending programs that didn't require as much sort of administrative oversight. And so decided to leave, took 8 months off, and traveled a lot, and backpacked across Spain and Northern Africa, and then Eastern Africa, and finally reacclimated to the professional world about a year ago when I rejoined McKinsey, and ever since have been working with large states, hospitals, and payers to try to reform the way we pay for healthcare at a state level, and that's what I'm doing now. I wanted to give you guys that background because when I was talking to my dad and trying to figure out sort of what he was going to talk about versus what I wanted to say, what I really wanted to reflect on was, with that backdrop, what I've learned since graduating from college. Because honestly, I've told some of you, walking sort of around campus with my L. Bean book bag makes me feel kind of right at home, and I feel a lot closer to, I think, to where you guys are in many ways than where sort of a lot of my colleagues professionally are, who are a lot older than me. And I think a lot of what I've learned since graduating would be really applicable to you guys as well. And so the first, I don't know if I'm double mic'd now, but let me know if you guys have an issue hearing me. The first is basically just a lesson about, and just three sort of simple lessons. One is just the concept of starting over. And as my dad said, and as the video showed, you are gonna have a bunch of jobs in your career, more likely than not. And today more than ever, life is truly a journey, and I honestly believe you need to embrace this. Implicit in this is that you're gonna have to get used to change, and more importantly, at starting over. But you guys really aren't strangers to this. I mean, you came to Longwood and you started over. Whether you are a freshman or a senior or a grad student or an undergrad, you're gonna be out of here soon, and you're gonna be starting over again. So how do you deal with this? My advice to you is to try to do two things that I really don't think people do well together, and that's to try to be aspirational and humble. On the one hand, you're all gonna be incredibly well-educated, capable people having gone to Longwood, and you should rightfully aspire to jobs that are outside of your comfort zone. On the other hand, Longwood is a comfortable and a safe place for you all, and you might feel like you want to stay close to home or stay in an area that doesn't sort of push you as much. When I decided to fly out to Chicago my second year of business school to try to join the '08 campaign, one of my best friends at the time happened to actually work for President Bush's 2000 campaign and then his 2004 campaign. And the advice that he gave me was the best advice I had going into that experience, which was to be aspirational and humble. And And as I've told you, despite my feelings that I had sort of a great education at the time, and I had real-world experience working in 3 different countries with McKinsey, advising companies on all sorts of things, and I had a bunch of experience I thought to bring to the table, I was fine starting off, answering the phone and getting the mail every day. And sometimes that's what starting over takes. Sometimes that's what opportunities look like. And I think it's important as you guys go forward to realize that you will have to start over, you will have to get comfortable with change, and opportunities come in all shapes and sizes, and you don't really know where things are gonna lead all of the time, and it's important to try to be as comfortable with that as possible. The second lesson, looking back on it, and this is a short one, is becoming comfortable with rejection and failure. For every job that I've gotten, I've probably been rejected from 10 others. For every internship that I got in college, for every scholarship I've applied for every girl I've tried to date, I've probably had a 10% success rate. But the thing to remember is you only need one. So get comfortable with failure, because as a very close mentor of mine told me, if you're not failing enough, you're probably not aspiring enough either. And the third lesson is basically just how to make sense of your life. And there isn't really an easy answer on this, but I think there's an important way to think about it and to look at it, especially as you are leaving college and going to be embarking on your first job and your second job and your third job, and as you are thinking about what those things are going to be. In a commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave at Stanford about 10 years ago, he talked about connecting the dots in your life. And as some of you may know, when Steve's mother put up her newborn son for adoption, she made her adopted parents promise that Steve would go to college. So for his whole life, Steve's adopted parents worked 2 jobs to save up enough money for their son to go to college. But when he got to Reed College as a freshman, he couldn't see why the experience was worth all of that hard-earned cash that his parents saved up. So he dropped out of school, but stuck around campus and decided to sit in on classes that he thought were actually interesting, not the ones that he was required to take as part of the core. And so he audited a calligraphy class, and to quote what Jobs said at the time, "I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle, in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical implication in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would never have had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have had them either." When I look at my life, I see how the countries I've lived in have shaped me as a person. India taught me to appreciate the culture, community, and religion. Indonesia was where my love for the outdoors was first born, hiking up tea plantations or down the crater of some of the world's largest volcanoes. Toronto taught me a sense of independence and forced me to make friends myself, and not through my parents, which had largely defined sort of how I had made friends growing up in India and Indonesia. And if I were to grab a beer after this talk with any of you, most of what you would likely come across is the product of my having gone to high school in America. I consider myself an American. But looking forward, I would have never been able to connect those dots. You can only do so going backward. It's also clear to me that the moments in college that proved invaluable to my success in my first job out of college, the parts of my time at McKinsey and my time in finance that proved critical to my success on the 2008 Obama campaign and in the White House, and the parts of my campaign and government experience that today prove invaluable to my job at McKinsey were never moments that I could have actually predicted with any great degree of success. It all makes sense looking backward, but it really is hard to actually make sense of it looking forward. So you basically just have to have faith and trust that looking backward, it's going to make sense. I wish you guys the best of luck going forward. if the students and faculty that I met earlier today are any representation of how you all are going to do, you're going to do really, really great. And as I didn't do so initially, I want to thank Dean Barrett and the sponsors for having us. And it's been a great day here at Longwood. So.
Questions?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of it was just psyching myself up to do it, and then there were some practical things. So I had a lot of reservations, and thankfully I had a very sort of supportive group of people around me, including a bunch of my professors who told me to absolutely do it, and a bunch of friends who were really encouraging me as well. And especially my friend Kadi, we had incredibly different political views, but he was still one of my best friends in business school, and I talked to him about how he joined the 2000 Bush campaign and about his experience, and he really helped sort of psychologically psych me up as well. The other part of it's just practical. I think that you can't sort of diminish the fact that I did read up everything I could about Senator Obama at the time. I thought about what I would say when I got there, about how I would sort of convince them that they should let me in, about all of that stuff. And so I think there's a sort of aspect of psyching yourself up and realizing that it's okay to take a risk. The worst case scenario for me was I spent 2 months spring break with my cousin in Chicago. And I had no idea what the upside was going to be, and there was no way for me to sort of predict everything that happened. So I think it's a mix of the psychological side and then the practical side.
This is not known to be a shy group, I'm told. So.
Yes, I see a hand back there. Do you want to?
Go ahead.
I actually was talking to someone about this just before, just before coming up here. I will quickly defer to you because the only actual sort of 100% voluntary decision I made in that regard was leaving the White House, which was a very, very tough decision. When I left college, it was because they wouldn't have me anymore. When I left McKinsey, it was because initially it was because I was at the end of a 2-year analyst program, and I knew I wanted to go to grad school, and so it was sort of an easy decision. Obviously, when I left business school, it was because I graduated. When I left the campaign, it was because the campaign ended. When I left transition, it was because the transition committee ended. But when I left the White House, that was actually the first time I consciously had to sort of think about this. And to me, it was sort of a confluence of factors. There was, being honest with myself, there was I am sort of physically exhausted element of it. But there was also just an element of my having felt that I had largely kind of finished the giant task in front of me. And the choice wasn't sort of whether I stayed on in the capacity that I was on. The choice was whether I found another sort of giant task in the administration that I wanted to tackle, or move to the private sector. And I've always envisioned having a life that, as much as possible, I would try to live in both the private and the public sector and the social sector, to the extent that that's possible as well. And so to me, I look back and I was part of the campaign or the transition or the White House for about 5 years, and I wanted my next adventure to be in the private sector.
Transitions happen differently for people at different demographic situations and ages. We left India, my wife and I left India, in some ways in a very flippant manner. Coming back from Calcutta to Mumbai, found a Wall Street Journal with an ad for a president of Levi Strauss Indonesia, and I said, what the hell, I'll get an interview in Hong Kong, and it's a holiday and a break. So that was how well planned it was. But no, somewhere at the back of our mind was also, as any parent with 2 young kids, to give our kids a better future. So as we made that transition to Indonesia, my wife was going to take a break with the children being very young. She could do that. This is a lush green island with several servants and huge homes and so on. But then 4 years from then, there were such things as better schooling, a longer time stay. You were an expat in one country. So we decided to migrate. We were not high net worth, so didn't come to the United States. The professional folks were being accepted in Canada, and we chose to go to Canada. And truth be told, at that time, we said, okay, we'll give a long-term home for our kids. Once they're out of school, it's time to go back and run a company back in the Far East. That never happened. We did well in Canada, and when the vice chairman calls you and says, can you duplicate what you did in Canada for the world out of the United States? I had never thought about coming to the US at that time. So we found ourselves in northern New Jersey. And one thing led to another. Our career, you ran all of marketing, then you ran Asia, then you ran Latin America, and soon we ran all of the world for Johnson & Johnson. So the transitions happened. Again, did I know that the president would reach out and offer you a job? No. As I said, I learned from our children that, did great stuff in commercial life. I'd really like to help Africa feed itself. When I learned a lot, I thought it could be done, and that's what we did. It worked. And as my wife kept nudging me and saying, you're a crazy guy, it's time to make money, I bring home the bacon. And just as I had promised her that I'd return to the commercial sector, the president makes the offer. So now I got to tell my big boss, and here is the conversation, which was, so help me again. You are going to make 1/11 what you were earning. You're going to fly the cheapest economy next to the toilet in the middle seat. And for being married to you for 30 years, we're going to live apart. So what am I missing here? So that was the transition to Washington. And then we're back in Princeton. So I think each of the moves happened for different reasons, but I think there is a demographic spin to this, because the moves which you make when you're happy-go-lucky, single, and swashbuckling, and 10% of the time making the girlfriend you want, and that's a different approach when you're raising a family with 2 kids. That's a slightly different one. I'm sorry.
What's the next expectation?
Look, we've always stated there is a 7th country out there. As to where and when, we just don't know.
Are you talking about for us living, or just as a global economic power? Okay.
Well, I think if we take that economic measure, just look at some of the numbers I talked to you about. Think about it. Why are European companies more globally engaged than US companies? I mean, it's not an accident of nature. The fact is, the UK, Spain, France, Germany, they have small domestic markets. They have to engage outside. The US has a large market. We live in a privileged way. We sell, let's say you sell to Walmart, money comes straight into the bank. Well, if you want to do business in India and China, as I was telling a class this afternoon, there's something called collections. There's no wire transactions. So you don't know when you're selling to someone, but you get paid for it. So there is that risk which comes about. But because the European countries were smaller, they looked for selling in markets outside. We didn't need to. Because our collection payment system was secure, we didn't have the incentive to. But the fact is 95% of the people who are going to consume stuff live outside this country. So we need to engage better. Is there a power? And yeah, we've heard this. I think people talked about the demise of America 20, 30 years ago and saying Japan will rule. That has come and gone. I have a significant amount of confidence in this country. I think it is the world's best. Think about it in different ways. How many countries do you know who've innovated? I was telling the dean over dinner and Diane over dinner yesterday. We gave the world mobility, cars, planes. We gave the world computers. And sure, others over time can manufacture it better, cheaper, and so on and so forth. But the innovative spirit continues here. And where else will you see someone who was born in India, was a gypsy around the world, serving in the cabinet? So this is a terrific place. I'm not worried about a seventh country coming or the next country coming. I think the difference between nations will compress, and that will keep on happening. And with that compression, how we engage with the rest of the world and how we relate to the rest of the world will have major implications. And you're already reading in the media some of the things which is happening. I don't want him to get complacent, so he has to answer that.
It's not my parents anymore. I think I don't know whether it's sort of a factor of luck or sort of psychological makeup, but I have managed to get really passionate about everything that I've done so far since leaving college, and I am sure that eventually I will have a job that really bores me and I want out, but and maybe I won't. But I have, I think, just been lucky enough to be really, really passionate about each and every sort of next step that I choose to pursue. And I think part of that is a factor of being sort of lucky with choices. I think part of it's just kind of a factor of something that I think we all have to just kind of keep in mind a little bit, and especially you guys as you think about what you're going to do next, is can you get motivated going to work every day for where you're going, for sort of the job that you choose to do after this, and think about it long and hard, because it's not. Jobs are sort of more than just a summer internship, or they're more than just kind of the concept of what you learn in class. They're kind of who you're working with, your commute, what it means about sort of the sort of actual location of the place and whether you like that or not. And there's sort of a lot of these life things that affect it. And I think when you take all of that into consideration, the question you need to ask yourself is, are you going to be really passionate about sort of doing a better job at what you're assigned, thinking outside the box and thinking about other ways you can help the company, thinking outside the box and thinking about other ways you can help your coworkers, helping that company recruit talent, and because you care enough about the company overall to kind of want to help them recruit talent. If the answer to those types of questions are yes, then I think that's a pretty good place to work. And at least that's what keeps me motivated. Is I do recruiting for McKinsey. I help students with interviews and all sorts of other things. And the only reason I do that is because I love the company, I love my job, and I want to make it as good a workplace as possible.
I didn't get a chance to be complacent. As I said, I left the corporate sector to do nonprofit work because of a statement Addie and his sister made, which is, you'd always say, I want to do that when I retire. My daughter said, Dad, you may die when you retire. When will you engage? You got to be happy, you got to be engaged. And that's what happened. You're not yet 50. In some ways, it's stupid to leave corporate America at the levels you were. But the satisfaction you gained on the other side, and prove to yourself that you can do it and apply those, and it works in those economies, was fantastic. Now the complacency is a different one, because some of my friends bring up and say, hey, you better do something, otherwise you'll be known as your children's father. You're marginalized. So I don't want to get complacent and get marginalized, so that keeps me going on. Let me do the first and second one. It's fresh in my mind. Mine was a very simple goal when I set out to engage in Africa. And it was, how do you help Africa feed itself? And why Africa? Because I had no connection to Africa other than the fact that as president of worldwide J&J businesses, I had oversight, but the continent sales revenues were so small, I couldn't even justify going there. So I wanted to do something where there was no personal interest other than truly wanted to change this. How could people die on our beat? Shame on us. So the goal was very specific, and the clarity of the goal helped it. So as I was looking at, I'd written to President Clinton because he had reduced the price, his organization had reduced the prices of HIV/AIDS drugs. You write to the President of America or ex-President of America, doesn't mean he'll reply back. Never heard from him. One Tuesday night around 9 o'clock, I get a phone call and said, "Hi, this is Bill Clinton." So I really thought someone was yanking my chain. So I picked up and said, "Yeah, this is George Bush." So this went on. And he said, no, you remember you wrote to me? I really didn't have any funding. That's why I didn't get back. But as it so happens, I've come into funding where your background would help. It's not HIV/AIDS, but I also checked you on the web. It is exactly what you're doing, helping Africa feed itself. Can you help? Tuesday night, I said, "What do you have in mind?" He said, "Well, let's go to Rwanda on Thursday." I said, I think I need to take my shots and so on and so forth, which is what I did on a Wednesday. On a Thursday, we were there. But we did something very different in Africa. So some of the things which you talk about. What do you leave behind which is sustainable? I mean, are you going to go and give what a politician needs? And if you give, how the hell do you know it's going to reach the people? You talk of corruption, you talk of institutions not being firm. As we looked at it in this situation, we did everything the World Bank said don't do. So I decided as I looked at it, the lofty goal is feed yourself. Break it down into its parts. You need fertilizer, you need seeds. If you have fertilizer and seed, you can feed a continent. But they couldn't afford the price. Why? Because this was the layers of complexity in how many people changed hands. So I said, I'm going to dismantle the entire market setup. It's so flawed. I'm going to take away the tender board, and I will negotiate. Because what used to happen, it's if you take fertilizer, it's used in agro product, but it's an oil and gas derivative. So someone will quote a price today, the African government doesn't decide for 3 months, the price which they quoted is no longer relevant. So nothing happened, no fertilizer. So, and the tender board, with our calculation, we came to the conclusion it was adding about 18% to cost. So we said there's no tender. But on the other hand, I said it would be simplistic. I'm going to ask, using my management ability, President Clinton's name, because that opened many more doors. And we actually went to the Saudis and the Norwegians, which is where I sourced fertilizer from, and landed at 28% below cost, what they were getting. And the idea was, I will get quotations from 3 companies. I will get them over a tight 3-day period. On the 4th day, I will award the tender, and I will negotiate. Because in a tender situation, the price you get is the last price. To me, the price you give is the first price, and I can negotiate. And what we did was we actually recorded it. So there's no better tender document than put a video and record, and everything, and the videotape or the CD is what we entered as proof. So we took the Lego apart, took a fault broken, possibly even corrupt system, and re-put the Lego together with a new system, and over 2 years, transitioned what we did. We taught the Rwandans, so they had to do this. It's not a permanent crutch, and it worked out. So I think that was one example, and once you do that, just because we took Rwanda and Malawi, it was not an aberration. These are landlocked countries. The cost of goods, for those of you who've done finance major, etc., 36% of the total landed cost was on land transportation from Mombasa or Dar es Salaam to get to this place. So it was kind of a nifty project. said, hey, this place, I can actually take American companies or institutions to provide loans to buy second-hand trucks or help set up someone in business, a trucking business, and get preferred rates of transportation, drop the 36% cost burden which was being attached. So we did a lot of nifty things, and it's still going on. So that was one portion of your question, because you took an institution away, you recreated it, you took wholesalers and middlemen who just patted on and added on, and made everyone be aware of the transparency in pricing, so they knew what they were getting. The second question you ask is about language and 3,000 languages in decline. My mother tongue happens to be Tamil. And my children and I communicate more in Indonesian than Tamil because as they grew up, I think it's a common language we use. But there is, again, wonderful internet connectedness, which you talk about, on YouTube, and I think it's called The Dying Language, and it's about Tamil. And how many million people spoke it, and how many million speak it today? For various reasons, from people no longer engaging in the language, and those who moved westwards have probably lost the language, to others who are in Sri Lanka, and there's a 2 million Sri Lankan clash and there has been a purge in language and so on and so forth. So yeah, things change, and it's sad that some of the old ancient languages are not there. If you take the African tribes, each of the tribe is different. They have their own languages, and that culture and the languages vanish. That's unfortunately the downside which comes with more homogenization in trade and more development across. Can it be arrested? No. But institutions, schools, etc., are the places where you have Asian studies, you have African studies, and somehow they keep it much more relevant because there's a history there. But I will not stand here and say there isn't a risk. There is a risk to development.
So many to pick from. I think the one I would, if I had to pick one, I think I would say perseverance. And the reason I say that is I think perseverance is the great sort of disintermediating factor between all sorts of other advantages and disadvantages people may have in life, whether it's intellect or where you went to school or what your parents did or who you know. And there are always things people can point to that are going to sort of be advantages in their lives or disadvantages in their lives. But I think one thing that everyone sort of individually controls for themselves is how much you want to persevere. I think when I think about either the folks that I've sort of crossed in life who've been really successful, or the ones that I quite frankly want to emulate, and the mentors that I've looked up to, they universally sort of have this characteristic of seemingly not ignoring their failures, but learning from them as opposed to letting it define them, and persevering through the hard times and accomplishing great things.
I'll just add two pieces to that. It's perseverance, and on the negative side, pride and prejudice. Think about it. Why should someone give you a job? You work in Indonesia, I came out, I wanted a job, but my ego was battered at one stage. So we were sitting in Indonesia applying for immigration. My wife and I met at business school, so we have very similar backgrounds. Both are economics majors, and then both have an MBA. We decided that we'll both apply as primary applicant, which is not done. So I thought a creative, cutesy letter, which wasn't all that creative or cutesy, basically saying, we are so impressed by Canada, we want to come, so both of us will apply as primary applicants. As it so happened, my wife is a market research specialist. I had marketing. On a 10-point scale, marketing opportunity was 0, so I had no chance of getting in, and she was on a 10. So it was ego which made me apply. The Canadian government was kind enough, they sent the check back. And they said, we will process your wife as the primary applicant. So I think we had in that, as though you learn, and you don't learn immediately, you skin your knees and your elbows. But it was humbling going in and looking for a job. You were managing director, president of a company, Levi Strauss, Indonesia. You're going in to a position as product manager in Canada, which was probably 7, 8 levels below what I'd already done. And the guy who hired me was fantastic. I mean, he's, other people would tell you don't have an experience. He says, look, I'm taking a chance on you because I don't think you'll stay. This job is far too low for you. But there is a higher job going to open up, and I can't give it to you because we've already promised a person who's been here for 3 years. So I don't want to disrupt it, but I do see potential. You prove to me I won't let you down. So it's the trust or your own confidence in yourself. That's what we did. But through the process, when you move a different culture, a different place, you need to have faith in yourself. I was being interviewed and someone said, so how long have you been here? I said, 3 weeks. Wow, 3 weeks, you speak good English. So, it happened. And another guy at the same time you meet, he tried hard and said, what is it, Suresh Sumar? I mean, he just juxtaposed the letters. So you roll with the punches and you learn. You learn not to take everything as an insult, but at the same time, you want to stay the course because you say, hey, I'm older than you. I am taking a job much lower than what I want, but I am going to demonstrate to you that there's value in me. So that's what happens and keeps you going. And eventually it rolls out. I mean, that's what in your 10 or 14 careers, whatever that is going to be, you'll be up sometime, you'll be low sometime. But whether you went into a mailroom and then was deputy CFO on a campaign, things happen. They don't happen in the pattern or the sequence you want to, but if you have faith and perseverance, they do.
I know that we all enjoyed the topics that you discussed. Thank you.
So I just got to tell you that I knew this would be really good, but it just blew my mind good. So you talked about the mission at Longwood is to develop citizen leaders who contribute to the common good of society. And I got to tell you, I think that we just saw 2 icons who have done amazing things so far. And I know that you guys are going to do even more, and I can't wait to see the next chapter. But we can't thank you enough. And what I want to give to you, now we only have one, so I'm not sure exactly how we're going to share this, but we'll work it out. We'll work it out. This is a home run baseball. Written by, and let me look it up because I wrote it down.
We don't work for the government.
Scott.
Yeah, we couldn't accept those gifts.
Written by, this was hit, actually the baseball hit over the fence, Scott Burkitt. And really what you guys did for us tonight is hit a home run for Longwood. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Just terrific. Thanks, guys.